A wolf asks a priest for help during a mass, causing panic among everyone present, and when the priest follows him to the place, he cannot contain his tears. A small Italian town, with its stone houses and terracotta roofs, rests silently in the valley. In a world where faith and nature intertwine, extraordinary events sometimes occur that remind us of the sacred connection between all of God's creatures. The small stone church stands out in the landscape, with its bells ringing softly and resonating through the valley. Inside, the gray-haired priest with kind eyes organizes the pews after the afternoon mass. He quietly hums a hymn as he works, his soft voice filling the sacred space. This man dedicated his life to serving this community, but nothing in his 40 years of priesthood could prepare him for what was about to happen. Suddenly, a distant howl echoes outside. The priest stops what he was doing and frowns. "That's strange. We don't normally have wolves this close to the city," he mutters to himself. The howl sounds again, this time closer and with a note of urgency. He walks towards the church door and opens it. As you look around, your eyes scan the lengthening shadows. Suddenly he goes still. "Good God!" he exclaims in a low voice. A few meters from the church entrance, a wolf with shaggy gray fur and intelligent amber eyes pants. His eyes meet the priest's, and there is an almost human intensity in his gaze. At that moment, two worlds met. The world of men and the wild world collided on the stairs of God's house. The priest, overcoming his initial fear, takes a hesitant step towards the wolf. The animal, however, does not retreat. "Hello, creature of God. What brings you here?" he asks in a low voice. As if understanding, the wolf turns and takes a few steps towards the forest. Then he looks at the priest, as if inviting him to follow him. "Do you want me to follow you?" asks the man, surprised. The wolf howls again, a sound filled with anguish and pleading. Sometimes faith asks us to take a leap in the dark, to trust the incomprehensible. And that night, the priest felt the call to do just that. One of the reasons why UFOs are so heavily investigated is precisely this. If you suddenly feel the urge to see something and end up encountering it in real life, you could find yourself, without knowing it, very close to a UFO, even before you see it, to perceive. The wolf begins walking towards the forest, stopping every now and then to make sure the priest follows him. With a mixture of fear and fascination, the man follows the animal through the growing darkness. The full moon lights the way as they enter the dense forest. The twigs snapping beneath your feet and the occasional hoot of an owl are the only sounds that break the silence of the night. As they go deeper into the forest, the priest begins to question where this strange journey will take him. What mystery is waiting in the heart of the forest? After walking for about half an hour, the wolf suddenly stops. He looks at the priest, and then at a point further ahead. The man follows the animal's gaze, yawning. "Oh my God," he murmurs. The light from your flashlight reveals a small clearing. In the center, partially hidden by the bushes, is a wounded wolf, lying on its side. Around him were 3 wolf cubs, trying to snuggle against their mother. At that moment, the priest understood. The wolf had not only asked for help for himself, but also for his family. He approaches cautiously. The wolf lifts its head, its eyes full of pain and fear. The wolf that guided the priest is at his side, gently licking his snout. "Poor thing, what happened to you?" asks the man with a hoarse voice. He kneels beside the injured wolf and notices a deep wound on its hind leg, likely caused by a hunter's trap. "Is that why you brought me here?" "To help you," asks the priest to the wolf. The animal looks directly into the priest's eyes, and in that instant, there is a mutual understanding between them. The man feels tears in his eyes. Faced with such a clear sign of love and devotion coming from a creature that many feared, the priest cannot contain his emotion. "Don't worry, little ones, I'll do everything I can to help your mother," he says in a shaky voice. He takes off his coat and gently places it over the injured wolf. The puppies, initially scared, begin to approach the priest with curiosity. Looking up to the sky, he murmurs, "Lord, guide my hands. Give me strength to help these creatures of yours." When the priest begins to carefully examine the wolf's wound, the other wolf sits next to him, as if watching him. The scene is deeply moving. A man of faith, surrounded by a family of wolves, all united by compassion and need. And so, in the heart of the forest, under the watchful gaze of the stars, an extraordinary story of trust, compassion, and the power of unconditional love began to unfold. The night wore on as the priest worked around the clock to help the injured wolf. His hands, used to holding rosaries and leafing through the pages of the Bible, now moved with surprising dexterity over the animal's wound. Years earlier, before becoming a priest, he had worked as an assistant for a local veterinarian, and now that experience that had been forgotten for so long was resurfacing as a blessing. With extreme delicacy, he cleaned the wound using water from a nearby stream and cut strips of his own shirt to improvise bandages. The wolf, although initially tense, seemed to understand that the priest was there to help him. Her eyes watched him carefully, reflecting a mix of pain and trust. The male wolf remained alert, alternating between watching the flashlight and comforting his partner with gentle licks on the face. The puppies. Curious and scared, they approached from time to time, sniffing the priest's hands cautiously. As the hours passed, the sounds of the night forest enveloped them, the distant howl of owls, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the occasional snap of twigs breaking in the distance. The priest murmured words of comfort, both to the wolves and to himself, and his voice blended with the symphony of nature around him. He felt a deep connection with those animals, as if everyone's destinies were intertwined in that silent, magical night. As he treated the wound, his thoughts were scattered. How would you explain your absence from the city? What would his faithful say if they knew he had followed a wolf into the forest? Doubt overwhelmed him for a moment. But as he looked at the wolf family, he felt a renewed certainty. That was his mission that night, as sacred as any other priestly duty. When the sky began to lighten with the first lights of dawn, the priest finally lay down. Exhausted but satisfied, he had done the best he could with the limited resources he had. The wolf's wound was clean and bandaged with strips of his shirt, and the animal seemed calmer, although still weak. However, just when he thought his work was done, a new challenge arose. Distant voices echoed through the forest, accompanied by barking dogs. Hunters. The priest's heart quickened. If wolves were found in this vulnerable state, the male wolf became alert, with his fur standing on end and his teeth exposed, ready to defend his family. The cubs shuddered in fear, startled by the unfamiliar sounds. The priest knew he needed to act quickly. "We have to get them out of here," he muttered, more to himself than to the wolves. But how to move an injured wolf and 3 cubs before hunters found them? The voices got closer, and with them the urgency of the situation grew. The priest looked around frantically, searching for a solution, his gaze fixed on his coat, which still partially covered the injured wolf. An idea began to form in his mind. With quick but smooth movements, he wrapped the wolf with his coat, creating a kind of improvised stretcher. The animal was heavy, but the adrenaline and determination gave the priest a strength he didn't know he possessed. "Come on, friend," he whispered to the male wolf. "Show me a safe place for your family." As if he understood perfectly, the wolf began to guide him deeper into the forest, always looking back to make sure the priest was following him with his precious cargo. The cubs trotted after them, confused, but following their parents' example. The journey was difficult. Treacherous roots and dense bushes made the path difficult. The weight of the injured wolf made the priest's arms shake with exhaustion. He stumbled more than once, almost falling but always recovering at the last moment. The sounds of hunting now seemed distant, while others were dangerously close. The priest prayed silently as he walked, asking for strength and protection for this unusual family now in his care. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably no more than half an hour, the wolf led them to a small cave, almost hidden by a curtain of branches and vines. It was a perfect refuge, offering protection and camouflage. Carefully, the priest placed the injured wolf inside the cave. He moaned softly, but her eyes, when they met his, were filled with gratitude, a gratitude that transcended the barriers of species. The cubs immediately cuddled up next to their mother, while the male wolf took up a guard position at the entrance. The priest knew that his mission was not yet completed. Hunters still posed a threat, and the wolf would need more care to fully recover. But how could he protect them and, at the same time, fulfill his responsibilities in the village? As he pondered what to do, the sound of human voices echoed through the forest again, closer than ever. The priest exchanged a look with the male wolf, and a silent understanding passed between the two. He needed to act, and quickly. With one last look at the wolf family, the priest left the cave. The end. Determined to keep the hunters away from that improvised sanctuary, his heart was beating hard in his chest, a mixture of fear and determination. "I didn't know exactly what I would do, but I was sure of one thing. He would do everything in his power to protect those creatures that fate had placed under his charge. As he walked away from the cave, he heard a voice. Guided only by his faith and compassion, the priest could not have imagined the trials and miracles that were yet to come on this extraordinary journey that had just begun. If you like exciting stories about animals, don't forget to leave a like. Your opinion is essential so that we can continue to bring you more content. Leave your story. It can serve as inspiration for other people who also love animals. The priest emerged from the dense vegetation, his habit torn and dirty, his face marked by the fatigue of a sleepless night. In front of him, a group of hunters with rifles in hand watched him in surprise. For a moment, silence took over the clearing, broken only by the occasional song of a bird and the distant barking of hunting dogs. "Father, what are you doing here?" asked one of the hunters, with obvious disbelief in his voice. Taking a deep breath, the priest decided that the truth, or at least part of it, would be his best defense. "My children," he began in a tired but firm voice, "I have been called tonight on a mission of mercy in the forest. A creature of God is injured and needs help." The hunters exchanged confused looks. One of them, apparently older than the leader, stepped forward. "Father, with all due respect, this forest is not safe. There are wolves around here, dangerous animals. That's why we are hunting, to protect our village." The priest felt his heart sink. How could I make them understand? How can you protect your family from wolves without alienating your own community? At that moment, an idea appeared in his mind, risky but potentially transformative. "My dears," he said, looking each one in the eye, "what if I told you that these wolves you fear are not so different from us, who also feel love and protect their families?" A murmur of disbelief ran through the group. The priest continued. His voice gained strength. "Tonight I witnessed something extraordinary, something that changed my understanding of these creatures. Allow me, Master Seal." There were doubts, but curiosity and respect for the priest prevailed. Slowly, he led them back to the cave. His heart pounded with every step. He prayed in silence, hoping that his faith would be enough. When they got close to the cave entrance, the priest asked them to stop. Cautiously, he approached alone and called softly. To everyone's surprise, the male wolf appeared, with attentive eyes but without showing aggression. "My friend," said the priest in a low voice, "I need your trust once again." As if understanding, the wolf retreated into the cave and returned moments later, carefully guiding his injured companion. The cubs followed closely behind. The hunters were speechless. The scene before them challenged everything they thought they knew about these animals. The wolf was visibly limping, and the makeshift bandages were still on his leg. The male wolf supported her with a protective stance, but without being threatening. "Look," said the priest, his voice choked with emotion. "This family is no different from ours. They protect each other. They care for each other. Father came to our people seeking help for his injured companion. They are not monsters to be feared or hunted. They are God's creatures, just like us." The silence that followed was profound. The hunters watched in wonder and confusion at the scene before them. The group leader stepped forward and lowered his weapon. "In all my years," he said slowly, "I've never seen anything like this. Father, maybe you're right. Maybe we misjudged these creatures. I have some medical supplies in my backpack," he offered timidly. "Maybe we can help treat the wound better." The priest felt tears of relief and gratitude in his eyes. "Yes," he said, smiling, "that would be wonderful." The priest emerged from the dense vegetation, his habit torn and dirty, his face marked by the fatigue of a sleepless night. In front of him, a group of hunters with rifles in hand looked at him in surprise. For a moment, silence took over the clearing, broken only by the occasional song of a bird and the distant barking of hunting dogs. "What are you doing here?" asked one of the hunters, with obvious disbelief in his voice. Taking a deep breath, the priest decided that the truth, or at least part of it, would be his best defense. "It would be your best defense. My children," he began in a tired but firm voice, "I have been called tonight to a mission of mercy in the forest. A creature of God is injured and needs help." The hunters exchanged confused looks. One of them, older and apparently the leader, stepped forward. "Father, with all due respect, this forest is not safe. There are wolves here, dangerous animals. That's why we are hunting, to protect our village." The priest felt his heart sink. How would you make them understand? How can you protect your family from wolves without alienating your own community? At that moment, an idea appeared in his mind, risky but potentially transformative. "My dears," he said, looking each one in the eye, "what if I told you that these wolves you fear are not so different from us, that they also feel, love, and protect their families?" A murmur of disbelief ran through the group. The priest continued, his voice gaining strength. "Tonight I witnessed something extraordinary, something that changed my understanding of these creatures. Allow me, Master Seal." There were doubts, but curiosity and respect for the priest prevailed. Slowly, he led them back to the cave. His heart pounded with every step. He prayed in silence, hoping that his faith would be enough to guide him. As they approached the cave entrance, the priest asked them to stop. Cautiously, he approached alone and called softly. To everyone's surprise, the male wolf appeared, with attentive eyes but without showing aggression. "My friend," said the priest in a low voice, "I need your trust once again." As if understanding, the wolf retreated into the cave and returned moments later, carefully guiding his injured companion. The cubs followed closely behind. The hunters were speechless. The scene before them challenged everything they thought they knew about these animals. The wolf was visibly limping, and the makeshift bandages were still on his leg. The male wolf supported her, with a protective posture, but without being threatening. "Look," said the priest, his voice cracking with emotion, "this family is no different from ours. They protect each other. They look after each other. The father came to our people seeking help for his injured companion. They are not monsters to be feared or hunted. They are God's creatures, just like us." The silence that followed was profound. The hunters watched in wonder and confusion at the scene before them. The group leader stepped forward and lowered his weapon. "In all my years," he said slowly, "I have never seen anything like this. Father, you may be right. Perhaps we have misjudged these creatures." That moment marked a turning point. The tension in the air began to dissipate, giving way to a feeling of wonder and, surprisingly, connection. One of the younger hunters approached cautiously, under the watchful eyes of the priest and the male wolf. "I have some medical supplies in my backpack," he offered shyly. "Maybe we can help treat the wound better." The priest felt tears of relief and gratitude in his eyes. "Yes," he said, smiling, "that would be wonderful." In the following days, a veritable storm of activity and emotions took over the small Italian town. News of the family of wolves under the priest's care spread quickly, sparking a mix of reactions among residents. Some were fascinated and moved by the story, while others were skeptical and fearful. The old barn on the hunter's property quickly turned into a makeshift sanctuary. The ground was covered with fresh hay, and a small fence was erected to create a safe and comfortable space for the wolves. The injured wolf, still weak but recovering, rested in a cozy corner, with his cubs always close by. The priest divided his time between his religious responsibilities and caring for the wolves. Every morning before dawn he would go to the barn, bring food, and check the wolf's progress. The male wolf, ever vigilant, began to relax in the priest's presence, sometimes even allowing a gentle touch to his thick fur. As the days went by, a small group of volunteers formed to help with care. Among them were some of the hunters who had witnessed the miracle in the forest, now transformed into enthusiastic protectors. A local veterinarian, initially skeptical, marveled at the wolves' intelligence and behavior, and offered his services free of charge. However, not everyone in the city was convinced. Some farmers feared for the safety of their herds, while others saw the wolves' presence as a threat to the region's hunting traditions. The priest faced criticism and questioning, but remained firm in his conviction. One afternoon, while the priest was in the barn changing the wolf's bandages, a group of angry villagers gathered outside demanding that the wolves be removed. The priest could hear the loud voices and felt the male wolf tense up next to him. "Calm down, my friend," the priest whispered, both to the wolf and to himself. "We need to show them there is nothing to fear." With a deep sigh, the priest went out to face the crowd. His eyes roved over the familiar faces, now contorted with anger and fear. For a moment, the priest felt overwhelmed by the task before him. But then, something warm and firm pressed against his leg. The male wolf had come out of the barn and was at her side, calm and dignified. A surprised murmur ran through the crowd. The priest took advantage of that moment of silence. "My dear brothers and sisters," he began in a firm but soft voice, "I know many of you are scared, but I ask you to really look at this creature next to me. Do you see a monster? Or do they see a being of God, capable of trusting, being loyal and loving?" Little by little, the priest told the whole story. The call in the night, the journey through the forest, the care of the wounded wolf. As he spoke, he noticed that the anger in people's eyes was giving way to curiosity, and in some cases, admiration. "These wolves are not our enemies," the priest concluded. "They are our masters. They are teaching us about compassion, care, and the interconnectedness of all of God's creation. We cannot reject this precious lesson out of fear or ignorance." There was a moment of tense silence. Then a girl let go of her mother's hand and timidly approached the wolf. Before anyone could stop her, she reached out her hand. The wolf lowered his head, allowing her to touch his fur. The scene broke the tension. Nervous laughter and surprised exclamations echoed through the crowd. The priest felt his heart fill with hope. Over the next few days, a gradual change began to occur in the village. Curiosity overcame fear, and more people began to visit the barn. The priest organized educational sessions, teaching about the behavior of wolves and their essential role in the ecosystem. The village children, especially, were fascinated. Under careful supervision, brief visits were permitted to see the cubs. The sound of children's laughter mixed with the puppy's playful barking became commonplace. The wolf continued to recover, and his wound healed well under the attentive care of the priest and veterinarian. He gained strength day by day, and soon moved more easily, playing with his puppies. The male wolf, in turn, became a constant presence at the priest's side during his walks through the village. The image of the robed man walking alongside the majestic animal has become a powerful symbol of harmony between human beings and nature. As the weeks passed, the priest realized that the wolf's presence was having a profound effect not only on the village, but on him as well. Always strong, he now felt more alive, more connected to the natural world around him. His homilies took on a new dimension, talking about the wisdom we can learn from all of God's creatures. One morning, while watching the wolf play with his cubs, almost completely recovered, the priest realized it was time to face the next challenge, returning the family to nature. The idea filled him simultaneously with joy and sadness. He knew it was right, that wolves belonged in the forest. But the connection he had developed with them, especially with the male wolf, was deep and meaningful. That night, alone in his small residence, the priest reflected on the incredible journey of the last few months. Silent tears streamed down his face, tears of gratitude for the experience, of love for the wolves, and of a deeper understanding of his role as guardian not only of his human congregation, but of all of God's creation. As he prepared to go to sleep, the priest said a silent prayer of thanks. "I didn't know exactly what the process of reintroducing wolves to the wild would be like, but I trusted that, like everything up to that point, the path would be revealed at the right time." Outside, the distant howl of a wolf resounded in the night. As if it were an answer to his prayer, the priest smiled, feeling at peace. The morning would bring its own challenges, but for now he would rest, grateful for the miracle of connection and transformation he had witnessed and been a part of. The priest woke up before dawn, his heart filled with contradictory emotions. He knew this was the natural and necessary result of his extraordinary journey, but that didn't make saying goodbye any easier. Word of the planned release had already spread throughout the city. A small crowd had gathered near the barn when the priest arrived. Anxious faces watched him, some with tears in their eyes, others with encouraging smiles. Inside the barn, the wolf family seemed to feel the importance of the moment. The wolf, now completely recovered, was alert and restless. The cubs, who had grown considerably in recent weeks, ran back and forth with nervous energy. The male wolf, as always, remained calm and vigilant. The priest knelt beside them, allowing himself one last moment of closeness. "My friends," he whispered, "you have taught us more than we could ever imagine. May God protect you on your journey home." With a gesture to the volunteers, the transportation process began. With care and respect, the wolf family was guided into a large transport cage, specially designed to keep them safe during the journey to the release site, deep in the forest. The procession that followed was something the little Italian villagers would never forget. The priest led the way, followed by the vehicle transporting the wolves. Behind, a long line of villagers, former hunters, fascinated children, converted skeptics, all united in this extraordinary moment. When they entered the forest, they were surprised. Silence took over the group. Only the sound of footsteps and the occasional song of a bird broke the stillness. The priest felt with every step that he was walking on sacred ground. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but also a brief moment, They arrived at a beautiful clearing. It was a location carefully chosen by the priest and the guards, far enough from the village to ensure the wolves' safety, but close enough to be able to monitor them for the first few days. With reverence, the cage was opened. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the wolf emerged. He stopped at the entrance, his eyes scanned the forest, and then returned to the group of humans. For an instant, his gaze met the priest's, and he felt like he was saying goodbye. The puppies arrived soon after. Their young bodies vibrated with excitement as they felt the freedom of the forest. Finally, the male wolf arrived. He stopped next to the open cage and looked directly at the priest. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. The wolf approached the priest, who instinctively knelt down. Gently, the animal placed its nose on the man's forehead, in a gesture that seemed both a blessing and a farewell. Tears streamed freely down the priest's face, and he wasn't the only one. Many of those present sobbed openly, moved by the beauty and profound meaning of the moment. Then, with one last look at the group, the male wolf turned and ran to join his family. In a matter of seconds, they disappeared among the dense vegetation, leaving only the rustle of leaves as proof of their passage. For long minutes, no one moved or spoke. It was as if everyone was trying to record every detail of that moment in their memories. Finally, the priest stood up and returned to the group. His face was covered in tears, but his eyes shone with an inner light. "My dear ones," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Today we are witnesses of a miracle, not just the miracle of healing and freedom for these magnificent animals, but the miracle of transformation in our own hearts." He paused, looking into the eyes of each person present. When this journey began, many of us saw these wolves as a threat. Now we can see what they really are, creatures of God, worthy of our respect and protection. This lesson, this opening of the heart, is the true gift they left us. A murmur of agreement ran through the group. The former leader of the hunters stepped forward, tears still shining in his eyes. "Father," he said, "you and these wolves have changed our village forever. We can no longer be who we were before." The priest smiled softly, with a slight smile on his face. "We shouldn't want to go back either. We have been called to a new understanding, to a new responsibility. Let us honor the gift we have been given by being the best guardians of all of God's creation." As the group slowly returned to the village, the priest remained behind for a moment. He looked deeply into the forest, his heart full of gratitude and admiration. A distant howl echoed through the trees. As a last farewell, the priest smiled, feeling a deep peace settle in his soul. He knew that the memories of this extraordinary experience would live forever, not only in his heart, but also in the hearts of all the inhabitants of the village. As he turned to follow the others, the priest said a last silent prayer of thanks. For a brief moment, the veil between the world of man and the natural world lifted, revealing the beauty and interconnectedness of all creation. If you were moved by this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our next exciting videos. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell to receive all notifications. And don't forget to leave a like if this story touched your heart. We are waiting for you for more adventures and emotions here on our channel. Until next time.